Hello everyone, it's Meg and today I'm going to be sharing with you guys some winter book recommendations. I did a video similar to this back in the autumn and you guys seem to really enjoy it, so I thought I'd do a winter recommendations. And I do feel like autumn and winter reading vibes are very similar, at least for me at any rate. Tend to go for slightly more darker books, more historical fiction, more like hard-hitting contemporaries. That's personally kind of what I like to go for. But obviously everybody has their own interpretation of what they like to read during the seasons, and I'm especially a mood reader, so obviously my reading taste changes with my mood. So I have 8 books to share with you guys. I have historical fiction, I have adult, I have young adult, I have a novella, all sorts of wonderful books, and hopefully it's not going to cross over too much with my autumn recommendations. If you want to go and watch that video, I will leave it in the description down below, but I don't think off the top of my head I have crossed over any of these books. Hopefully not, we shall see. But yes, without further ado, let's get into the video. So the first book that I have on this list is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. If you guys watch my autumn recommendations, I don't think I did include this book, but I did include another hard-hitting contemporary, and they tend to be sort of the types of contemporaries that I like to go for during this winter time. I don't know why, there's just something about it, something about reading a really gritty book on a gloomy winter day. Something very appealing about that, and also slightly cosy. And this is one of my favourite books of all time. I'm sure many of you guys have heard of this book, you've probably heard me talk about it. But this is a wonderful book, and it's basically about our main character Eleanor Oliphant, who basically has the same routine every day. She's done the same thing, she doesn't really have any friends, and then one day something happens which kind of changes the course of her life. And this book is brilliant. I know, like I said, a lot of you will have heard of it, but if you have not picked it up, I highly recommend it. It's so wonderful, and I think it's the perfect read to read during the winter. I actually read this during January, the very first time that I read it, and adored it. So this is the only adult contemporary that I have on this list, but it's really, really wonderful and I highly recommend it. Next up, I'm going to go for historical fiction, and I have 4 historical fiction here. I realised over maybe the past year or so that I have really started to get into historical fiction, which is something that I never thought I would. But I have read all of these books and I adored all of them, so I'm hoping you guys might as well. So the first one that we have, which will be no surprise if you are a regular watcher on this channel, is A Snowfall of Silver by Laura Wood. And obviously you guys know I love Laura's books, and this is her latest novel which came out in October, and this follows our main character Freya, who runs away to London to become an actress, and then she meets this theatre company and she ends up travelling with them on this theatre tour where they do the show The Importance of Being Earnest, and it's so wonderful. I feel like it's a very perfect time to read this book when I'm filming this. I'm filming this video towards the end of November. It's probably going to go up at some point early-ish December, but it's perfect because this book starts late November, very end of autumn, and then it kind of ends, or near enough ends, Christmas time, which is the perfect kind of read into that kind of transitioning from late autumn into winter. And it's just an absolutely wonderful, magical book, and I'm only recommending this book by Laura because her other 2 are set in winter, and obviously summer even. Sorry, the other ones are set in summer, this is set in winter, so you can obviously read her other books anytime you want, but obviously this is set during the winter, and there's a snowstorm where they get snowed in at a theatre, which just sounds so cosy, and it's just such a lovely whimsical book that I feel like you could really lose yourself in. So yeah, I'm not going to talk about it anymore because you guys know how much I love her books, but this is my first historical fiction recommendation. The next book that I have is Longborne by Jo Baker, and if you are a Pride and Prejudice fan, you need to read this book because it is a Pride and Prejudice retelling told from the servants' perspective. Wow, that was a mouthful. And I really adore this book. It's been over a year now since I've read it, maybe about a year and a half, something like that, but I read it beginning of last year and I really adored it. It is very much its own story, even though obviously it does follow on with some of the themes from the original Pride and Prejudice story. It's very much a story about the servants and the realities and the hardships that they go through, and kind of their dreams and aspirations outside of working at Longborne. And I think it's so well done. It's really interesting getting to know the servants a lot better. You see them a little bit in the original book, some of the servants, but I adore this book, and you get to see some of the other main characters from a very different perspective as well, which is also really interesting. So if you are a Pride and Prejudice fan and you love historical fiction, I highly recommend this because it's so intriguing and probably one of the best Pride and Prejudice retellings that I have read so far. Next up we have The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. And again, another historical fiction, and this is a book that I feel like will definitely whisk you away because it's also kind of magical and it's to do with circuses, and I don't know why, but circuses, like reading books that relate to circuses also seem like a rather cozy, wintry-esque kind of vibe. I don't know, it's something that appeals to me during this time of year, but I really enjoyed this book. I do feel like it was a bit long for my personal taste, but I love Erin's writing style. I love the world that she builds. It's so intricate. It's one of those books that you hear so much about, but you don't really know what it's about until you read it. It's very mysterious in that kind of way. But I really enjoyed this book, and I feel like it's just a perfect book that you could just cozy up and lose yourself in during the winter. And then the last historical fiction that I have on this list is Dangerous Alliance by Jennieke Cohen. I still don't know if I'm saying her name right, I'm really sorry if I'm not. But this is one of the more recent historical fictions I read. I read this actually towards the beginning of this year, and this is a 18th century, I think it's an 18th century novel, which is kind of ostentatious vibe. So again, if you love Jane Austen and kind of like Downton Abbey, I was trying to think of the word then, I was going to say Northanger Abbey, but Downton Abbey, I think you will really like this book. It is about our main character called Vicky, and she's 17 years old and she lives on her family estate with her parents and she loves it there. She's kind of a bit of a wild child to a certain extent, and then one day her sister returns because her husband has been mistreating her, so basically they have to take Vicky out and into society to find herself a husband to basically save her family estate. And there's a mystery aspect in here as well. It's a lot more action-packed than I was expecting, which is not a bad thing. It was actually really intriguing, and I listened to the audiobook whilst reading along with this for a lot of the book, and I did really enjoy it. Nothing special about the audiobook, but I did enjoy it. And yeah, it's just a really fun book. Again, one that you can get lost in. The characters are great. I love the discussions around this, and if you do read this book, I highly recommend reading the author's note in the back because it discusses the topic of marriage and divorce during the 18th century, and I really enjoyed it. So if you're, again, ostentatious fan, historical fiction fan, Downton Abbey fan, I think you will really enjoy this book. And then the last three reads that I have are all Christmassy themed because obviously winter is the season of Christmas, so how could I not include some Christmas reads in this video. So the first one that I have is Let It Snow by John Green, Maureen Johnson and Lauren Miracle, and I'm sure most of you have heard of this book. It is 3 stories told by each of these authors, and oh, it's really shiny. They all kind of link, and I've probably read this book about twice. I've probably read some of these stories more than twice. I don't think I would reread it now personally, but I remember the very first time that I picked this book up and read it, I really enjoyed it, and they're just some really lovely Christmas reads. I think the first story is my favourite out of these 3 personally, but I think it's just such a fun Christmas read, and it's really easy and fun, and it's just great. So if you are looking for a couple of short stories around Christmas time, I highly recommend this. And then the next book I actually haven't read yet, but this is my Christmas read for this year, so I know I'm recommending it and I haven't read it yet, but I feel like I am going to like it because it's from one of my favourite authors, and that is This Winter by Alice Oseman. And you guys should know I love Alice by now. I've read all of her books apart from Solitaire, and this is a Heartstopper / Solitaire novella, and it's obviously to do with Christmas, and I don't really know much about it apart from the fact that it's about Charlie and Tori's family at Christmas time. Nick will be in it obviously. I think it might deal with mental health as well, but I'm not entirely sure. But I'm just really looking forward to reading this, and it's got illustrations in it and comic strips, and it just sounds wonderful. So I know obviously I haven't read this book yet, but I feel like I'm going to adore it, and I feel like any Alice Oseman fan is going to adore this book as well. And then the last book on this list is One Day in December by Josie Silver, and I read this book for like my Christmassy read last year and I really ended up enjoying it. There seems to be quite a few books that are kind of similar storyline to these, like kind of similar vibes to it, which I'm not mad about because I plan on getting to all of them at some point. But this book it starts off in Christmas where our two main characters is like a love at first sight. They see each other at a bus stop and then they disappear and they never see each other for a year. And then a year later our main character Laurie is introduced to her best friend's boyfriend, who is the guy that she saw at the bus stop a year ago. And this book takes place over 10 years, I think roughly about 10 years. And I just adore this book. Even though it does start out at Christmas time, this book you could probably read any time of year because obviously it goes through these characters' lives throughout the whole year, like all of the seasons of every year. So honestly, it's not necessarily just a Christmas read, even though you would think it would be by the, you know, the page, the title and the cover and all that sort of thing. But it's definitely a book you can read any time of the year. But I just really adored this book. It has a lot more meaning. It was a bit more heartfelt than I thought it was going to be. But I honestly enjoyed it so much. It was probably one of my favourite books of last year, or towards the end of last year anyway. I really loved it. I could relate to Laurie quite a lot. And I'm looking forward to getting to more books like this because there are a couple of them out now and I definitely can't wait to get to them. But really enjoyed this book, and if you have not picked it up, I highly recommend that you do. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said before, this is kind of my own interpretation of the kind of books that I like to read personally during kind of like the winter and the colder months. Everybody's reading tastes are different, but I hope you may find a book from this list that you have enjoyed, or if you have read any of these books, let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on them because I would love to know, and especially let me know if you have read This Winter by Alice Oseman and you enjoyed it. From what I have seen so far, the reviews have been amazing because obviously it has been out for quite a while, but now it's obviously out in a physical book form. But let me know if you have read it and enjoyed it, because I would love to know, because I'm very excited to get to it, and hopefully it will be a wonderful Christmas read. If you like this video, then please make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more bookish videos from me, then make sure you hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you'll be noted every time I post a new video. As always, I will leave links to my social media along with the links to my Goodreads in the description down below for you guys. But thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you so much, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!